Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. You know what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to do Social Studies, Unit 1, Lesson 2, Day 2. I just had to get that out. Yes, indeed. Mr. Paul is wearing his Goodwill shirt that I got from my community. Remember, communities help us get the things we need to live. We have three basic needs. We need food, clothing, and shelter. Those three things your families also provide for you, and they also provide love. I'm going to turn off the music. It is fun to listen to. I like The Empire Strikes Back. Okay, my good friends, we talked about this book and I said it was coming back. It's called I Live in Brooklyn. And the person telling the story is the little girl named Michelle. So this is kind of Brooklyn through her eyes. Based on the things that she was saying about her community, how do you think she feels about living in Brooklyn? Did she seem sad about it or kind of excited to share all the things that there is in Brooklyn for her to enjoy? Now, we noticed in the cover yesterday that Brooklyn is a special kind of community that we would call a big city. So a big city usually has tall buildings, lots of people kind of living close together. And the tall buildings are a way to get more people in a smaller space, which is different than where I live. I live in a place where houses are spread out and you have yards. We also talked about the book describes some characteristics of Brooklyn. Characteristics are a way to describe something. All communities have their own special characteristics. We said characteristics could include the buildings, the people, but they also could include natural and man-made things as well. And one other point with stories. Stories often have a setting, and in this situation, the setting is a real place, Brooklyn. Now, Mr. Paul told you that we can learn things from books in two different ways. One way we learn things from books is by the pictures. The second way we learn from books is by the words. I want to do a quick picture walk and see what kinds of characteristics or things we can learn about Brooklyn told through the eyes of Michelle. So we're going to do a picture walk and just see some things that we see. So we're going to just take a quick look here. So there she is. Right off the bat, we see there's some water. We see there's boats. In fact, I think that's probably the Atlantic Ocean. We do see some buildings here. And these are probably, some of these might be apartments and some of these might be houses that are just right next to each other. We see some transportation here. I don't see a school bus there. I see a public bus for anybody. We see playgrounds. We see some people. And we see bridges. We see cars. Looks like we see some animals. They have a zoo. Out of the city, they have apple orchards. They have to sort of drive away from the city to see apple orchards and things like that. It looks like we have things going on in the city. Looks like they have a park, a place to go skating. They have a pond nearby. It looks like they have a hill. Looks like they have a pool that you can swim in. There's carts on the sidewalk in the big city where you can buy things to eat. There's also a park. Must be they have bike trails there. It looks like there's gardens in the city. People have their own gardens. And that's kind of the end of our story right there. What are some things that we learned from just looking at the pictures? And we also saw some trains too. They had like subways. We saw trains and cars. I didn't mention the trees. We saw bridges, gardens, houses, churches, and hills. Now, some of those things are man-made, and some of those things are natural. What are some man-made things that you see? Well, people made trains and cars. I don't think people made trees. People build bridges. Gardens are things that people plant. So I'm going to say gardens are man-made, houses and churches. But I'm going to circle some things that I think are natural. We saw hills. What else did we see that was natural? I think that's the only thing that I wrote down there that was natural. Now in the words, we're going to look in the words of this story. I might not read the whole thing, but we want to learn some characteristics about Brooklyn using the words of this story. I'm hoping when you do owl time that when you're reading to self, that you'll realize there's a couple of ways you can read books. You can read the pictures and find out information about the story, and of course you can go to the words. I'm going to kind of speed read this, but we do find some things about her. So she says, my name is Michelle, and she says, I'm 6 years old. I live in Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. And now we have a characteristic that she says in the words. She says, a river separates us from Manhattan, so we have a river there. Nice. My neighborhood is called Carroll Gardens. At night when I'm in bed, I can hear ships blowing their whistles. Remember, I'm just doing words here. Then she talks about in her house, how people get up. She doesn't like to get up early. She has a fun dream. When we get outside, though, we find out something else. She takes a bus. So if you're in Brooklyn, New York, you will see buses. That is a characteristic. That drops me off at a school. Ooh, a building where people go to learn. And then her mom keeps taking the bus to her office. Offices are found in buildings where people do work. It says the bus comes to our corner sharp. Sometimes they have to run for the bus, and mom always says, good exercise. So mom sometimes runs late too. At the school, a characteristic of the school is it sounds like they have a playground outside. So they have a place to have fun. She talks about what they do in the school, and she also talks about the bake sales. But those aren't going to be any characteristics for us. Now we're on a different kind of a bus. We're on a school bus. So if you're in Brooklyn, just like in Grand Rapids, you would see school buses. And let's see what else they say. It says we take a field trip every month. The school bus takes us to many places. The aquarium, the zoo, and the theater. Those are places where you can go to learn things and to be entertained, or places to have fun. That's what the words tell me. They talk about the Central Park Zoo and also the American Museum of Natural History. I do like natural history museums. Sometimes they have dinosaurs there, just saying. She talks about going to a place where there's apple picking, but she's in a different place in upstate New York. So we're not in Brooklyn here, I don't think. And she also talks about picking pumpkins. And they go trick-or-treating. Mom sewed her costume, and she gets lots of candy. They talk about how there's, in the Christmas time, they have vendors who are selling Christmas trees. And what else do they do? There are stores. She talks about, Daddy takes me window shopping on Fifth Avenue. So if you're window shopping, that means you're going to stores that have big windows with displays. So if you were in Brooklyn, New York, you might see stores that kind of show you what's inside because they want you to come in and make some purchases. What else do we have? They bundle up and they go to Prospect Park. That's a place to have fun. And they slide up and they slide down the hill. So a hill is a natural characteristic. They also go to a skating rink, which would be a man-made place. And they also talk about feeding ducks in the park. So there's a park, which is another place to have fun. What else do we have? She's having a friend over for for like a sleepover, and then she goes to swimming class, so she must be at some type of a pool. And then it looks like sometimes they like to get a treat and they go to a restaurant and maybe they order some kind of a dessert and grandma has her coffee. So big cities often have places where you can, get special foods like that. She does talk about in the words she labels the kind of carts that there are. She can get shish kebabs, honey nuts, hot dogs, coffee, bagels, that kind of thing. So she labeled these pictures here. They talk about going to the zoo once again, the playground. There's a lake with boats, lots of trails and grass. And then they talk about the garden, and she likes to draw pictures in the garden. And then our book ends. So just to remind you what we did, we were learning things from books. And from our book, it told us some of the characteristics of Brooklyn. But then when we read the words, we got even more oodles of information. We found out that there was a river, buses, school, zoo, roads, a museum, a park, a pool, restaurants, food carts, lake, playground, and there is a market and a bowling alley. The market was like a farmer's market. Well, once again, if I circled some things that were found in nature, people don't make rivers. That's a natural thing. I'm going to circle river. That's found in nature. Also, there's buses, schools, zoo, roads, museum, park. Those things are all man-made. The pool in the building was man-made. Restaurant, food carts, lake. That's going to be a natural thing. So I'm going to circle that too. We also have playground, market, and bowling alley. So we found two different ways to get information from the book. So we found out info from the pictures and from the words. So we found out a lot of things about a big city that is called Brooklyn. Now, there's another chart that I was thinking of showing you. I'll see if I can find it. Yes. I'll see it. Well, first of all, I think I want to review a few words with you. We talked about natural characteristics. Natural characteristics are things that are not made by humans. The examples could be trees, rivers, and lakes, and hills. Those are all natural characteristics of a community. We also ran into some other things too. There are some words on here like buses, trains, and cars. Those would be example of transportation. Transportation is different ways people move. You can drive a car, you can take a train or a bus. You might see people walking, people ride bikes sometimes too. If you're in a really big city, you might see subways. And even in Grand Rapids, we have an airport, you will see planes flying overhead. I also talked about businesses. Businesses are places where people sell goods or services. So if Mr. Paul wants all of his hair cut off, I'm going to go to a barber and they just cut it off and I pay them money for that. That would be an example of a service, something someone did for me. Mr. Paul needs some work on a tooth. The dentist is going to fix it, but that's a service. Now, a good is something that I get. When I go to Goodwill and I walk out of the store with this nifty shirt, that was a good. If I buy something at a store like groceries, those are goods too. Okay? Well, let's see what else we have. One other thing. I'm looking. Wanted to show you a chart. Yes, here we go. Do you see this chart right here? This chart says characteristics of a community. Communities have buildings, they have natural characteristics, they have businesses, they have transportation, and places to have fun. Now, this is a big project, but I'm wondering if you could do this. What if you went out in your neighborhood with an adult again, and could you try to find at least one thing for these 5 areas. If you went out in your neighborhood, could you find an example of a building? Maybe you might see a church, a store. You might see a place where people work. Maybe could be anything like that. Also, natural characteristics. Do you find, are there hills? Are there rivers? A lake, a pond near you? We also talked about transportation. What kind of transportation do you see? How do people get around? How do people move things in the community, things that people want to buy? Do you see trucks or trains? And also places to have fun. Is there a park near you? Maybe you see a building that's a school, but does the building have a playground, a place to have fun that's right on its property? So see if you can do this. Once again, here is your mission. Go out in your community, try to find one building, a natural characteristic, a business, could be Meijer, forms of transportation. It could even be walking, and a place to have fun. I'm wondering if you can do that for me today. Alrighty, I'm just going to turn on some of my favorite music. We're listening to The Empire Strikes Back. Thank you for listening. Good luck with your mission. Bye-bye.